Welcome back to Brian's Addiction. What are you doing, Brian? Oh, side note, by the way. Just a question, just to let you guys know. I offered Brian $20,000 to basically not use his phone or play any kind of iPad for the entire trip at NOOBCON.
That includes not taking photos. I mean, you said not using my phone.
Yeah, but you're going to sneak in and play. The problem is Brian has an addiction playing games online. He can't focus at all. All right, Steven, go back to the video. Okay, where will you leave off?
Well, so I'm just going to do a little bit of recapping. In 2009, as you probably know, I visited Wizards to discuss the reserve list. I wrote an article on Star City Games in which I went through all the prices in 2009. I looked at the prices of Alpha Underground C, Beta Underground C, Revised Underground C, and I looked at a lot of the reserve list prices. I created a spreadsheet. Daniel, I created a spreadsheet that had every reserve list card price at the time. And so I did a deep dive analysis.
What did they hire you for?
What?
What did they hire for?
No. I wrote for Star City Games. They had us come in, me and Ben Blyweiss and others come in to talk about the reserve list.
Oh, okay.
And my basic point then, as it is now, is the reserve list does not serve the main purpose for which it was designed, which is to protect card value. My basic argument is that if you could reprint cards, you would increase demand for those cards, for certain cards, and therefore you would increase demand overall for the old school rare cards, and thereby increase the prices for most of the old school cards.
You recommended to Wizards to do that?
Yes. At the time, my assessment was that if they reprinted, so if they broke the reserve list and then separately reprinted Power or Dual Lands, it would result in probably a short-term decline in revised Dual Lands and Unlimited Power.
Probably short-term.
Probably short-term, but a long-term overall increase in certainly Alpha and Beta, without question. Because you'd be doing it with different art, and it wouldn't be the original cards. People want the original cards. The nostalgia, which we all agree, Brian agrees, Daniel agrees, is a force, requires people to have the original card. So reprinting the card with Chris Ron art or Volkan Baga art will have its own whatever, but
it has its own secondary market.
Secondary market. It'll have its own interest in people who like Volkan Baga art will want it.
That's a good point.
But they will want the original. But there will be another tier of players.
Right.
So let's say, for example, the reprinting power makes Vintage more accessible in a larger format. That means some subset of those players will want the original cards at some point when they can afford it, and therefore it creates more demand over time. Demand for old school cards is segmented into multiple markets. You have collectors, investors, and different levels of investors. You have vintage players, commander players, and old school players. So there's lots of different sources of demand.
Brian, do you agree that vintage would increase if they reprinted out reserve list cards?
If they were. Okay, well, as far as reserve list cards, obviously it's a very broad spectrum of things.
Well, Power 9, all that stuff.
Power 9. Would more people be
the key cards, yeah.
Unequivocally, yes, of course.
So let me give you a couple of...
But you'd be going potentially from a 1, on a scale of 1 to 10, you'd be going from a 0.1 to maybe a 1. That would be my
all
guess.
Magic.
No, I'm saying it. I'm just saying on a hypothetical 1 to 10 scale.
But
with Commander being at a 10.
But is that increase
from a 0.1 to a 1?
And is that increase in vintage players, with the goodwill of Magic and all the other negative parts, worth it?
I think absolutely zero.
Zero.
Absolutely.
Zero. That's the problem.
Let me make my uninterrupted points, because I make one point and then you interrupt and we get sidetracked to a side discussion. The vintage championships.
This is an incredible video
The
series.
vintage championships have increased hugely over the last 6 years. The vintage championship a decade ago was about 150 players. It's now 400, 500 players. So that's
in the whole world.
No, in the North American Vintage Championship.
But people are coming from overseas for that.
No, they have the Japanese and European ones.
There's duplication.
So
there's got to be overlap.
750 total in the world.
You're talking about a totally inconsequential.
Can we say less than 1,000? Less than 1,000.
Nobody's playing that format. Even if everybody comes together once a year and there's 500 guys.
There's a reason for that.
That's nothing.
The reason people don't play the
How many players are in Commander?
Millions.
The reason that people don't play Vintage is because it's the most expensive format. It's almost impossible to get into, to build a deck, unless you're
it's a bad format.
And there's no prize support.
It's a bad format. That's why
it's a bad format. That's why.
I totally disagree.
Well, earlier in the very beginning, Brian was saying it's Force and Will 8 million times. He's exactly right.
That's not exactly.
It's not right. Okay, then tell me what it is then.
What?
It's not Force and Will 8 million times?
This video is not about Vintage.
Yeah, we're not assessing.
No, what's great about this video series is that basically you guys are talking about different things.
I'm trying to get to something, okay?
All right, what are you trying to get to?
Please make my
All right, go ahead.
points uninterrupted. it's a little bit frustrating.
Sounds like Ross Perot in the, the 1990s.
Steven's running for president in 10 years.
Look,
is it 92 or 96?
He ran both.
Yeah, it was 92.
So look, so the question is, would abolishing the reserve list and subsequently printing stuff have a negative effect on Magic? And I think the answer is unequivocally no. I think that, and specifically in the context of old school cards, that abolishing the reserve list by itself, without accompanied with any reprints, would have no negative effect. Even with reprints, I don't think it would negatively cause most old school cards to see a significant decline. I think any immediate decline in price resulting from a decrease in demand, any decline in price resulting from an increase in demand would be offset by new demand, because players who would be introduced to other formats would then eventually want to acquire demand for the original card. So if you had offsetting demand, you have offsetting demand.
Why would they? Because they don't have any nostalgia. They have no emotional attachment to those cards. They've heard the reason why those cards, people care about those cards, the reason why they have any emotional engagement in them at all. Why they're not like my mom, who when I show her my beta Black Order deck goes, oh, that's nice. The reason why they don't have that reaction is because they didn't grow up playing with those things. And if those things are incredibly commonplace, if they are, and to use this analogy again, if they're Thomas Kincaid prints that have different artwork and have no emotional attachment, and everybody has them, then there's nothing special about them at all. There's no reason to even be interested in them. Those players are not going to go, man, I've been playing with my alternate artwork Moxes and Lotus and stuff for the last 5 years.
Okay, guys, we got to pause this. She has to leave the thing. Hold on a second. Thomas Kincaid's going to go decline. Thomas Kincaid's going to decline in value here.
We're going.
Middle of the thought.
We're back. Go ahead.
Okay, so Steven is postulating that people who have gained an interest in vintage because of this hypothetical reprint of the reserve list. They've been playing with their alternate artwork Moxes and Lotus for a while. They're 4 or 5 years in and they go, you know what? Instead of paying $250 for this Mox Sapphire, I'm going to go and spend $10,000 to have a beta version of this Mox Sapphire.
Or unlimited even, with Dan Fraser. Yeah.
Okay? The corollary to that I can imagine is someone who plays Commander format, and they play for a long time and they have one deck that they really love. They really love their Dave deck or something, or they love their Rubinia Soulsinger deck, or whatever their deck is, and they decide, you know what, I'm going to enshrine this deck and make it special. I want it to be something that's prestigious that people will take notice of. I'm going to foil out my deck. Well, the cost of foiling out your deck is going from a regular version of it to a foil version, which is, depending on the card, I imagine it's anywhere from double the price to maybe 5-6 times the price, depending on what.
Oh wow! Look at that!
How desirable
What is
it
that?
is.
The cap? What is that? Yeah, top of that thing.
The old cathedral.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
It's starting to get really beautiful.
Gothic.
Wow. Good print, guys. Tourist.
We are in a beautiful old European city.
Yeah. Look at this. It's kind of French inspiration, but it has its own style.
I like the cranes
We're in
juxtaposed
white
with the old cathedral.
And I love the graffiti on the art.
Yeah, and the graffiti on top of some of those buildings is really endearing.
All right, so back to Rubinia Soulsinger. So what you're saying is that the older.
My point is that when people want to upgrade their deck,
Yeah.
they seek out foil versions, because the foil versions are prestigious and they cost 2 to 3x more.
Right.
They don't cost 50 or 100 or 1,500 times as much.
Right.
Depending on the card. I don't think that people are going to go and play with cards that feel completely commonplace, that they have no emotional attachment to because they didn't grow up playing with them in the early 1990s, and they're going to go and stomach the idea of spending 50 or 100x more to get a beta version of a card just to play with it.
So you don't think that the foil versions of the Black Lotus of Chris Ron will sell well?
What I'm just saying is that
Steven's
argument is that the reprinting of these cards, the cheapening of them, of their reputation and their renown, would have no deleterious effect on the secondary market of the high-end
You
stuff.
just put a word.
I know, right?
Yeah, I love that.
Look, here's the thing. You can't cheapen an Alpha Sarah Angel by reprinting it. There's a 10th edition Sarah Angel out there. The 10th edition Sarah Angel,
There's a foil version.
0 ways would an M15, let alone a 10th edition Sarah Angel, cheapen the allure, the aesthetics, the prestige of an alpha or beta Sarah Angel.
But who
an
cares about an alpha or beta Sarah Angel?
Everyone.
No, not true.
Old school players are. I can't tell you
old
how
school
many
players do, and there's like
how many times
how many,
I see
how many
old school
people are out there.
We're talking about the bigger.
Let me talk, because I let him get his whole point about this special allure and stuff. Look, in the Alpha Card 40 forum, people are constantly asking, how can I find an Alpha Sarah Angel? Alpha Sarah Angel is iconic beyond words within Magic. The reprinting of an M10 Sarah Angel has zero reduction in the nostalgia, purity, prestige, whatever you want to call it.
I agree with this.
Patina. If you reprinted Black Lotus and made it commonplace, it has zero diminution on Alpha Black Lotus. It's still the most iconic card in the game.
I agree with what you're saying, but you said your dumb argument, the reserve list, wouldn't have affected the value.
No, that's not it.
That's what you said. Isn't that what you said? Isn't that what you said?
Yes.
You said zero.
No, but I'm talking about Alpha and Beta Black Lotus. Alpha and Beta cards. Alpha and Beta cards.
He actually said it would cause the prices to go up in the long term.
Yes.
That would be the effect.
I agree. I think that's true. I think that if you reprinted those cards, what it does is they circulate more frequently so people know they exist. And then you also create more demand in different sub-Magic formats.
Like Vintage.
Which
is only going to be how many players more?
Exactly.
How many players are we guesstimating?
Well, look, you can't just change one thing and make Vintage a big format. If you reprint the cards...
I think there's too much risk.
No.
The word is...
Can I speak?
Okay, yeah. Sorry. I haven't spoken in the video at all, by the way.
You've interrupted me hella. But anyway, listen. If you massively increase... if Vintage were... Two things. If you could build a Vintage deck for $200 and you had massive prize support behind it, like Pro Tour level support, over years and years so that players become familiar with it, would be bigger than anything else. The problem with Vintage is it's the least accessible format and has the least amount of support. So what do you expect? Look, Type 1 was actually, they had to work so hard to make Type 2 popular. They had to do so much work because people wanted to play Type 1. Type 1 was cool, it had the best cards, it was the most interesting gameplay. They had to work overtime to make Type 2 popular. They had to put so much money in front of Type 2 in 1995 and 1996 to make it popular.
Ryan, do you agree with this?
Vintage has been completely disinvested.
Well, the Pro Tour was a major promotional.
If prize support increased, Wizards, and the reserve list was abolished to have the cards, would Vintage go up? Would Vintage go up?
If you made Vintage more accessible than Type 2, and you had the most prize support, of course it would be the most.
Do you agree with that? Yes or no?
By far.
Do you agree with it? And why?
If it had the most prize support and was the most accessible format, it would by definition
be
the most
popular format. Do you think it'd be the most?
I don't think that
the most popular.
I don't agree because I don't think it would supersede Commander as the most popular format.
Okay, well I'll give you that.
I think that fundamentally.
I'm talking about competitive.
No, I think that fundamentally people want to have fun playing games of Magic, and I think that Commander is the most fun way to play Magic.
I'll give him that. When I said format, I meant competitive formats. Just to be clear.
Do you agree with that? Competitive format.
As far as the things that people are playing at Friday Night Magic and so on.
No, listen to what Steven said.
If
you made it super
was the
accessible,
cheapest format and had the greatest prize support, would it be the most popular?
Well, I actually had a point that I wanted to make about that, and I'll try to answer it just in a little bit lengthy fashion. If you've been playing Magic in the last 10 or 15 years, and your entire experience with it has been either through Commander or through Standard, maybe Modern, you have a certain idea about the way that games of Magic play, the way that the interactivity goes, how long the games take, and certainly what they involve. And my perception, at least, of contemporary Vintage and the way that those decks play out, a lot of them, either the super oppressive containment decks like Stacks and so on, or the super hyper-aggressive decks like Humans and Delver and so on, there's two particular sides, two particular aspects of the way that contemporary games of Vintage Magic play out. The tools that you're given in that format and the way that you can win the game so rapidly feels a bit almost like a god mode or a cheat mode in a video game. It's like having access to all of these tools that are so different from what you're used to. It's like, imagine if you play a game and you go through it for a while and then you download the hack that allows you to go and modify your character and get access to all the items and go and just basically face roll all the content easily without any challenge. There's some people that want to do that, but generally once they cross over from playing the game legitimately into playing with the hacks, their actual interest and engagement in the game is very finite. it can be fun to be in God mode for a couple of days, but once you've been in God mode for a week, there's no challenge presented left. There's no more fun left to be had in actually playing the game. I think that for a lot of people, playing that version of Magic, which is such a departure from the way that the game has been constructed and designed for the last 10 or 15 years, I think that for a lot of those people to go and play with those, to have those tools at their disposal and play these games of vintage Magic would be a big departure that would be exciting for a while, but I think that a lot of the novelty would wear off relatively quickly, and they'd be left to sort of wonder, well, what is the point of playing this format where so many of the games are decided just by my simple opening 7 cards? The power level's so high that I can just do all these crazy insane
seems like Alpha 40
on turn 1.
I think what Brian is saying is basically a really well-articulated view of someone who doesn't really understand the ins and outs of vintage. I mean, it's a very fair.
No, I will definitely play ignorance
perspective
about contemporary vintage format. That's just been my impression.
Yeah, I think vintage is by far the deepest, most interesting format, most intricate. That is, the lines of play are by far the deepest. Like, if you were to juxtapose vintage, let's say vintage now, but the heyday of vintage, in my opinion, is like basically 2009, like 2000, the most sophisticated vintage. It exists today. The depth of play, like the lines of play, the sophistication of play, and the balance, and the razor's edge, just vastly outstrips 93, 94. Like in terms of the interactive component, the lines of play, the depths of play, the branches, the sheer quantity of branches, and the relevance of each choice.
I don't make a point about that at all. I'm not comparing it to 93, 94. I'm talking about.
I think you're right though. There's a different kind of play, but I don't want this video to be about. Look, the point.
We've had a lot of videos, by the way, so it doesn't really matter at this
point. I don't want this series. The series is about the reserve list, and specifically, it's about what has caused the price effects of old school cards to go up. What are the variables? What are the relative importance of those variables, significance of those variables, and in particular, what effect might abolishing the reserve list and reprinting reserve list cards have or not have on the prices of cards? That's the debate we're having. And my argument is very simple. My argument is that abolishing the reserve list is the best for Magic. And there's multiple layers for this. The first is that I don't think the reserve list serves its original purpose, which is to preserve value. I think that the old school cards have such inherent value and will retain that value even if the reserve list were abolished and even if those old school cards were reprinted. And I think it's factually just undeniable. You even admit the very first video, Daniel, you agreed with me on that point.
I did agree with that.
Now, what that leaves, if it's not about finance, if it's not about the effect of cards, of the reserve list on the value of cards, then it's about something intangible. And Brian has broadly, over the course of these 4 or 5 videos, maybe even more, made 2 broad arguments. He's made an argument about making promises and the integrity of the company, and he's made another argument about the emotional patina and significance and specialness of the cards, right? That's essentially, and there's some elements to that.
Patina, how do you spell that?
Patina. So he's basically saying that these cards are so special, and if they're commonplace, they no longer have specialness. I just disagree on every point. I think that on every one of those points. I mean, look, I've already said an M10 Magic, M10 Sarah Angel in no way diminishes the appeal.
But that's not the point. That's not the point.
It is the point. The point is that.
Sarah Angel has been reprinted in every single edition of Magic since time immemorial.
But Sol Ring has been reprinted in foil editions over and over again in Commander decks. An Alpha Sol Ring and a Beta Sol Ring will never be superseded by a foil Sol Ring. Ever.
Although the masterpiece Sol Ring is $500.
All right. Okay. All right. Next topic.
So no, hold on. Let's stick to the Sol Ring.
Fine.
I want to stick with this because Sol Ring is a perfect example.
Okay.
Sol Ring is reprinted over and over and over again in Commander products.
Sure.
And yet, does Alpha Sol Ring or Beta Sol Ring price impacted by that?
It's not reserve list.
My point is that the reserve list is not that significant. It's the Alpha Beta Unlimited that matters. It's Arabian Nights. It's the original print run. We talked about this already. Remember Swords to Plowshares, Sarah Angel, original Arabian's Urnham Gem. Compare original Arabian Urnham Gem to Chronicles. The Chronicles one is worth 50 cents. Okay? Yep. There's no impact whatsoever.
So are you saying that the investors have nothing to do with it? Are you saying that the people that are 30 now can afford it can earn part of it?
What I'm saying is,
how about those people that want an Alpha Sol Ring in their Commander deck?
I'm going to say this one more time. I'm going to summarize my whole argument.
All right.
And specifically on price.
Fine.
The price point.
All right.
Life is complicated, Magic is complicated, and prices are complicated. The prices of Magic cards are driven by a number of variables. Primarily, the ability of people who have now disposable income, who were nostalgic about those cards to buy those cards, the allure and appeal of old school as a format or set of formats, vintage, commander, and investors. All of those things are driving prices. They are variables that increase demand. The main thing that over the last 10 years has caused the initial spike and is the precipitating cause and ultimately the main cause of the escalation of old school price values is old school Magic. That's it.
All right, Brian, you're closing.
I'm not done.
This is your closing.
I'm trying to make this is a nuanced argument.
Okay.
Because what I don't want you to do is to straw man me and say, Stephen, say, what? No, it's what you do. You ask the question.
All right.
The straw man.
I'm not straw
the straw man of my argument is old school is driving the prices. What I'm saying is that old school created a rate of increase such that investors then moved into the market. And if you didn't have old school, the year-over-year rate increase would not have escalated to such a point that investors would not have come into the market to this degree. And I agree that vintage and commander also are drivers, but I think the main variable, if you were to run a regression over these 5 variables and using as the dependent variable the price of old school Magic cards, and you were to run a statistical regression, the most important factor, I believe, in the last 10 years is the emergence and frequency of old school formats, despite how small they are. They're the ones that creates the most statistical correlation. Now, it's not driving it as much today because the investors have since flooded the market, but they were the main driver at the beginning of this. It's not a price spike. Someone said that earlier. It's a price hill. It's a mountain. It's not a spike that goes up.
Where's your graph?
I threw it away.
All right, Brian, your rebuttal, your final statement for these videos. And you can thank everybody for their time on this.
Well, I think it makes sense to repeat a point that I made in previous videos about
louder.
Something that Stephen, I think, has discounted to an extent throughout the entire conversation that we've had. And I think that the world is better, and particularly the Magic the Gathering world is better when it has very lofty aspirational goals and very special things that occupy a rarefied space in people's experience, in the mythology of the game, in the stories that people tell to each other. I think that those are intangible things that lend a tremendous amount of value to Magic, and are also, honestly, one of the things that have contributed to the game's longevity in a way that's hard to understate. I think that there are precedents that have been established, particularly in the gaming sphere. One anecdote that I'm fond of telling to people about this is the experience of the game Star Wars Galaxies, and the arc that Star Wars Galaxies went through, as far as having something incredibly aspirational and very difficult to acquire that very, very, very few people had access to, a tiny, tiny fraction of the player base, which was the ability to become a Jedi when that game came out. It was an incredibly ridiculous grind that took years. And people complained endlessly, and they said, we all want to be Jedis, we all want to have the best stuff and the best force powers and so on. And it was very, very hard to do that. A small, select group of people had access to the Jedi powers and had done the work to become Jedis. And at a point, a year and a half or so into the game, they relented to player pressure. They banned the reserve list, which was effectively access to the Jedi Knights, and they let anybody just make a Jedi. And suddenly there were Jedis everywhere, and there was nothing special about it at all. It lost all of its prestige. The game had no long-term aspirational goals, and the game collapsed and closed within 6 or 7 months after that event happened. It literally killed their game, the decision to allow people to make Jedi Knights in Star Wars Galaxies. And I may be simplifying a more complex thing there, but that's the way that situation unfolded. And I'm just going to talk here. I think that from the perspective of players either coming into the game or players who have been playing for a long time, that having these aspirational things, these things that are mythological, that most people who have played Magic, whether they've been playing for 20 years or for 5 or for a year, have never even encountered a Mox or a Lotus or seen an Ancestral Recall play or cast Time Log. And they've only heard about those things. They've heard about them in legends.
They're
They've
mythic,
read about them.
yeah.
They are mythological. When I do a lot of old school testing, but unfortunately I have almost nobody to play test against. So what I normally wind up doing is giving some person, often a stranger that I've just run into for the first time at Card Kingdom or whatever, I'll give them one of my decks to play test against me. People literally shake with excitement. They tremble, they take pictures, they call their friends on the phone, they take a picture of the board. They say, look what I'm doing here. I have just played my first Black Lotus. This is an event that I will remember for the rest of my life. I will remember this moment. I will treasure it. It is incredibly impactful. The reason why that moment exists, the reason why it's preserved, is because those cards are special and rare. Because they have only been reprinted once in time, more than 25 years ago. And have never been reprinted because of this pledge, because of what the reserve list represents. If you reprint them, even as accessible
you cheapen
reprints,
them.
And you make
That's what
them,
he calls it.
and you
It's
make
not
them
cheapening
cost
them.
nothing or relatively nothing, and you make them totally accessible. Yes, you enliven the interest in a effectively dead format. You get a little bit more people engaging.
Dead
with
as
format.
in vintage.
Vintage format.
I don't think it's just about vintage. It's about legacy, reprinting dual lands. It's about actually making legacy and vintage possible. Yeah.
If you reprint those, you irrevocably change the landscape of what those cards represent.
What they mean
for
to
a
people.
Very, very dubious benefit. A benefit that is honestly intangible.
It's very
and
commercialized.
Very
Commercialized.
could be potentially
Absolutely.
catastrophic.
No, it's not
Absolutely
not just for
commercialized.
people. Not just
It's
for
all
people.
for corporation
Yes,
money.
No,
Daniel's point.
because
but
Wizards
I am
wouldn't
right.
make,
Listen.
Wizards wouldn't make much. You just interrupted. Wizards.
Steven, I'm in my closing argument.
All right.
Daniel's point is
Sorry.
extremely valid because people will always view Wizards of the Coast's actions through a cynical lens. If they go and reprint the stuff, even people who have been advocating for the abolition of the restricted list will still be saying, oh my god, this is just a naked, cynical cash grab. Wizards is abandoning their legacy and their promise to the players in order to just make more money. That's how it will be cast. The value of reprinting this stuff relative to the damage that it will cause to the game's reputation and to the company's reputation and just general player sentiments could be potentially catastrophic.
There we go.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I think that's.
But more importantly, just as my final point, the world has a limited number of things that are special in
Yes.
people's esteem,
Thank you.
particularly in gaming.
Yep.
And I think that having things like this, having things out there that people grind towards as aspirational goals, owning a Black Lotus and a Power 9 set is like being a Jedi Knight in the context of Magic. That's what it is. It feels super special. There are people that will go and devote years of their life to acquiring that goal, to grinding to become a Jedi Knight in the context of Magic. It is special, and it has a value that cannot be understated or exaggerated. If you reprint those cards, if you cross that line and it cannot be taken away, you can't go back. You,
Okay,
lose,
hold on,
that,
hold on.
you lose that forever in
Just
the
to hold
cost
it,
of the
to
game.
hold it like that.
All right, we'll film
All right, so
Daniel.
here's my thing.
Well,
The man behind the camera.
No, let me say something. The lighting's good?
Yes, yeah,
All right,
you're good.
guys. So I've been listening to these two guys yap about this for like literally 2 hours. I want to thank you guys for listening. This is my closing thoughts. You guys know me as a collector, an investor, an art collector, a fan, a player of these games. I will tell you that the greatest gift, one of the greatest gifts of my life, other than my wife and my family, is Magic. You guys all over the world, going to NOOBCON, going with these two great friends, the memories are priceless. You guys have your own memories. You guys go all over the world to travel to these Magic Fests or Grand Prix. You go to Eternal Weekend, you play. Brian goes to Card Kingdom religiously and plays, meets different people. We all have our memories. The fact of the matter is, this debate isn't about, it is not to fight. It's about to discuss. So I want you guys to make sure you understand that.
Yeah, and Steven and I don't have to.
We have no.
Neither person has to be
there's
wrong.
On the camera, what you see
yeah.
is not a fight. It's a debate. It's lighthearted, also very great conversation and a very great trip. But here's what I feel. This is my true belief. I'll be first to admit I'm biased. I'm biased because I'm the most biased. It's not because I sell these cards. It's because I have to agree more with Brian than Steven. This is my neutral Switzerland, literally Switzerland.
That's right. We're in Switzerland.
I'm literally Switzerland. I'm being honest.
We came here to have the debate.
There's that
pure neutrality.
When you reprint the cards in reserve lists, while it could potentially increase player count, it could potentially not affect the value of the cards. What you're destroying is the awesome memories that I have seen in these photos back in the day. Remember the 1996 World Championship? Hold, please, Steven.
But you're saying you destroy things that you can't destroy.
No, sorry. You cheapen using Brian's words.
That's bullshit.
The reason why
bullshit.
the reason why you cheapen them is because that when you allow
an Alpha Black Lotus can't be cheapened.
Steven, can I finish?
Yeah.
When you allow,
it can't be cheapened.
I understand an Alpha Black can't be cheapened, but when you allow this kind of these cards to be reprinted, it's like a Mickey Mantle. You allow the 52 toss Mickey Mantle to be reprinted over and over again. The specialness of holding a Mickey Mantle, holding an Alpha Black Lotus, taking a picture of a board safe, all Alpha 40 cards, right?
Yeah.
It cheapens it by having these foil Chris Ron versions. No. I swear.
It does not cheapen it.
That's the debate we're having.
Yeah, that's the fundamental disagreement.
Fine, whatever. You know what the word is, guys? I'm one of the biggest purists that you'll ever meet. I believe in the original.
Exactly.
Not only art.
That's why it can't be cheapened.
The special thing. When you print these things in like little fake forms, or no offense to Chris Ron's art or Wokabaga,
you're making my argument.
What you're doing is you are making Thomas Kincaid prints, and you might as well sell them online. You might as well have, no offense to Chinese people, you might as well have the Chinese manufacturers start printing these things off like proxies, as they do now. So yes, it cheapens the crap out of them because you might as well start printing them in a. What? How is it not? Anyway, those are my closing statements. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you guys for your commentaries. Wave goodbye. We'll talk about something else. And thank you for listening.
We've said enough.
No, we haven't. You guys got your last.
All right, that's all we got. Goodbye.